In July 1947, the United States military announced it was in possession of a flying disc, only to retract this 24 hours later and claim instead it was a mere weather balloon. But that answer did not satisfy everyone, and did nothing to end public speculation and theories. This was the start of one of the most famous UFO cases in recent history that continues to capture the public's imagination to this day. It began in early July of that year when rancher W.W. or Mac Brazel discovered strange debris on his remote ranch not far from the town of Roswell, New Mexico. What he found appeared to be made of paper, tape, tinfoil, and sticks with, quote, no sign of any metal in the area, which might have been used for an engine, and no sign of any propellers of any kind, although at least one paper fin had been glued onto some of the tinfoil. This discovery happened amidst an increase in UFO sightings, beginning earlier that summer on June 24, 1947, when Kenneth Arnold, a pilot flying over southern Washington state, reported to have seen 9 saucer-like aircraft flying in formation, flying at an immense rate of speed. In a radio interview recorded within the following days, Arnold went on to describe what he saw as resembling something like a pie plate that was cut in half with a sort of convex triangle in the rear. In the next few weeks and months, sightings of flying saucers were reported across the country and were frequently reported on and discussed in newspapers. It is in this context that Brazel made the discovery at his ranch, and though he didn't think much of it at first, eventually came to hear about the alleged flying saucers and wondered if what had crashed on his property was one of them. He told the sheriff, George Wilcox, about what he found, and Wilcox went on to tell Major Jesse Marcel at the Roswell Army Airfield, a nearby military base. The debris was inspected, and soon a statement was released to the press by Lieutenant Walter Hout, a public relations officer at the base. Quote, the many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality yesterday when the intelligence office of the 509th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force Roswell Army Airfield was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc through the cooperation of one of the local ranchers and the sheriff's office of Chaves County. The flying object landed on a ranch near Roswell sometime last week. Not having phone facilities, the rancher stored the disc until such time as he was able to contact the sheriff's office, who in turn notified Major Jesse A. Marcel of the 509th Bomb Group Intelligence Office. This piqued the interest of news organizations across the country, but only for a short time. About 24 hours later, then Brigadier General Roger Ramey reversed the initial statement and denied it was a flying disc, with one newspaper reporting on July 9th, an examination by the Army revealed last night that mysterious objects found on a lonely New Mexico ranch was a harmless high-altitude weather balloon, not a grounded flying disc. As for where this weather device came from, Warrant Officer Irving Newton, a forecaster at Fort Worth, claimed about 80 weather stations across the U.S. used the same type of device, and it could have potentially came from any of them. Also on July 9th, the Roswell Daily Record published an interview with Brazel, who said, I'm sure what I found was not any weather observation balloon. He also added, but if I find anything else besides a bomb, they are going to have a hard time getting me to say anything about it. And so it seemed the mystery was solved. The incident remained obscure and relatively unknown until decades later, when new questions arose and more people became interested in revisiting the case. A 1978 interview with Jesse Marcel, one of the original military officers who investigated the Roswell crash, conducted by nuclear physicist and UFO researcher Stanton Friedman, is widely credited with reigniting interest and questions about what exactly was found in Roswell in 1947. Marcel also participated in a second interview with the National Enquirer in 1980. In the article, he described the strange object he was called to investigate at the ranch, saying that it didn't burn when he held his cigarette lighter up to it, and it also had indecipherable markings on it that he compared to hieroglyphics. Marcel went on to describe seeing strange light formations in the sky not long before the debris was found at Brazel's ranch, and when asked directly what he thought the Roswell wreckage might have been, is quoted as saying, well, as far as I know, or can surmise it, I was pretty well acquainted with most of the things that were in the air at the time, not only from my own military aircraft, but also in a lot of foreign countries, and I still believe it was nothing that came from Earth. It came to Earth, but not from Earth. Being an experienced pilot and respected member of the military, Marcel lent credence to those who were skeptical of the official narrative. He went on to appear on television shows in the early 80s where he added that the object would not bend and alleged a cover-up. They wanted some comments from me, but I wasn't at liberty to do that, so all I could do was keep my mouth shut, and General Ramey is the one who told the newspapers, the newsmen, what it was, and to forget about it. It is nothing more than a weather observation balloon. Of course, we both knew differently. Another reason for renewed interest in Roswell was the publication of The Roswell Incident by Charles Berlitz and William Moore in 1980. Berlitz had published several books on similar subjects such as Atlantis and the Bermuda Triangle, and Moore was a prominent UFO researcher. The book builds on Marcel's new account of the incident, dismissing the possibility of it being a crashed weather balloon, and alleges there was a government cover-up of extraterrestrial material instead. Multiple eyewitness accounts are retold in the book, like Grady or Barney Barnett, who claims to have come across a second crash site with dead alien bodies still there around the same time the debris was discovered in Roswell. As Barnett died long before the book was published, his stories are told by people who he supposedly told while he was still alive. Barnett was working for the federal government in soil conservation when, on the morning of July 3, 1947, he allegedly came across a crashed, metallic disc-shaped object near Magdalena, New Mexico. The book tells how he also saw non-human bodies scattered around the crash site, describing them as having round heads with small eyes and no hair, with heads larger in proportion to their bodies, and wearing one-piece gray clothing without any visible buttons or zippers. A research team from the University of Pennsylvania is said to have joined him in observing the crash site before a group of U.S. military personnel came and told them to leave. Barnett reportedly told this story to a number of his friends and family. However, there are no contemporary witnesses to corroborate what he said. Additionally, a diary kept by Barnett's wife throughout 1947 suggests that he was home in Socorro throughout the first week of July and not where the UFO was said to have crashed. There was, however, a notable witness who came forward years later and said to have seen the same thing Barnett saw. Gerald Anderson claimed when he was driving through New Mexico with his family as a kid, they came across a crashed flying disc similar to what Barnett described, with bodies lying around it. He also says they encountered an archaeological research team from the University of Pennsylvania, and the military later came and told them to leave. This account, though, is also not entirely reliable due to many inconsistencies in the names of places mentioned and people involved, and no corroborating witnesses. Anderson said his uncle kept a diary in 1947 which contained details of what they saw, but after a forensic investigation, it was found the ink used did not exist in the 40s and had to have been written in the 1970s or later. Researchers Kevin Randall, Don Schmidt, and Thomas Carey published an entire paper on this supposed UFO crash and examined Anderson's claims specifically, coming to the conclusion that the cliff dwellings he has mentioned don't exist, the archaeologists who are working the planes deny it happened, residents of Horse Springs say they heard nothing about the crash, and the dates don't track, and the diary Anderson submitted was written sometime after 1974. Amidst the growing interest in Roswell, another witness came forward. Glenn Dennis, who in July 1947 was a mortician at the Ballard Funeral Home in Roswell, says he got a call one afternoon asking about the smallest coffin size they had and how long it would take to get them. Not long after, he got another call from the same person asking about the preparation process for bodies that had been out in the desert. Dennis goes on to say later that day, he got a call to transport an injured serviceman back to the nearby military base, which he was allowed free access to because they knew me. After he was there, he went into the staff lounge where a nurse came out of an examining room with a cloth over her mouth and told him to leave or he'd get in trouble. He also says a captain and other military personnel told him to leave and forget he saw anything. The next day, Dennis says he called to find the nurse again and they agreed to meet up. After making him promise never to reveal her name, the nurse told him about the autopsy that happened at the military base. She drew me a diagram of the bodies, including an arm with a hand that had only 4 fingers. The doctors noted that on the end of the fingers were little pads resembling suction cups. She said the head was disproportionately large for the body, the eyes were deeply set, the skulls were flexible, the nose was a concave with only 2 orifices, the mouth was a fine slit, and the doctors said there was heavy cartilage instead of teeth. The ears were only small orifices with flaps. The smell was reportedly so bad she and the doctors working there got sick. Dennis says he called the base the next day and she wasn't there, and he learned later she died in a plane crash during a training exercise. There is no evidence for this other than Dennis's affidavit. UFO researcher Kevin Randall wrote in a blog post skeptical of Dennis's story. He took us to what had once been the base hospital and laid out the scene for us. He pointed to where the ambulances had been parked, what door he had entered, and what loading area had been used by the military for the bodies. The problem here was that the hospital as it stood then in the 1990s was not the hospital in 1947. More people came forward throughout the years who have claimed to witness some sort of extraterrestrial activity in Roswell during July 1947, some even claiming that the rancher W.W. Brazel was briefly detained by the military and sworn to secrecy. This corresponded with a growing interest not just in Roswell, but in UFOs and aliens in general. In 1984, UFO enthusiasts claimed they uncovered a secret government project also dating back to 1947. The Majestic 12, as they called it, was allegedly a top-secret group of 12 government officials whose job was to recover and research UFOs and extraterrestrial life, supposedly authorized by U.S. President Harry Truman in September 1947. Their existence was made known to the public in 1987 when a series of classified documents were released. The documents included a letter authorizing the creation of the Majestic 12 by President Truman, a memo from November 1952 made to brief then-President-elect Dwight Eisenhower, and another one from 1954 from Special Assistant to President Eisenhower Robert Cutler. Apparently, in December 1984, film producer Jamie Shendera received a mysterious envelope in the mail. It contained a roll of undeveloped film which he took to his friend and co-author of The Roswell Incident, William Moore. When developed, the film showed the leaked classified documents that seemed to confirm there was a cover-up, not only at Roswell, but also other UFO incidents throughout the country. The Robert Cutler memo was reportedly discovered in 1985. Shendera and Moore, with the help of Stanton Friedman, spent 2 years trying to confirm whether the documents they had were authentic before releasing them. It wasn't long after that most people started to question the authenticity of the documents, pointing out things like the documents' use of the word media instead of using press, which was more commonly used at the time, along with the format used that didn't match other government papers from then. UFO researcher Philip Klass discovered on the memo from President Truman that the signature was photocopied onto the paper, as well as how the dates were written in most of the documents being inconsistent with how they were usually written on government documents at the time. Also, according to Philip Klass, the dates were written the same way William Moore wrote them in his letters. In order to find out if classified information was actually leaked, the FBI conducted their own investigation into the Majestic 12 and determined the documents were fake, marking copies with bogus during internal review. Some researchers believe William Moore may have played a role in spreading or encouraging the hoax. Moore had reportedly mentioned to his friend Brad Sparks in 1983 the idea of creating counterfeit government documents to try and get more witnesses to come forward. Others believe the government may have intentionally started the hoax to try and throw off investigators. While some still maintain the documents are authentic, the general consensus, even among UFO researchers, is that the Majestic 12 is a hoax. It should also be mentioned that there is no evidence of the Majestic 12 outside of the already debunked documents. Throughout the 1980s and into the 90s, there were more alleged witnesses' accounts, articles, books, and TV specials made about Roswell. In 1995, a film purporting to show the actual autopsy of aliens in Roswell was released and, not surprisingly, was revealed to be fake not long after. All this speculation was put to an end in 1994 when the U.S. Air Force released an official report titled The Roswell Report: Fact versus Fiction in the New Mexico Desert, and another one in 1997 called The Roswell Report: Case Closed. In these reports, the Air Force admits of a cover-up, not of an alien spacecraft, but of a formerly top-secret military operation called Project Mogul. Project Mogul's main purpose was to track Soviet nuclear tests by detecting sound waves. Being no longer classified, it was no longer important to keep secret. According to the report, the deployment of giant trains of balloons, over 30 research balloons and experimental sensors strung together and stretching more than 600 feet, could neither be disguised nor hidden from the public, and were often required to be launched during the day. The report also states recovery crews routinely listened to news broadcasts of reported UFOs to assist them in recovering anything that crashed. The reason why some of the servicemen at the Roswell Army Airfield could not correctly identify the debris was due to compartmentalization of information regarding Project Mogul and knowledge of it being strictly controlled to avoid anything about it getting out. Each participating entity received only enough information necessary to accomplish its assigned tasks. As for the alien bodies several witnesses described, the reports explain they are most likely high-altitude crash dummies from various military experiments, though it should be remembered that what Brazel discovered at his ranch and the initial reports about Roswell in 1947 did not include anything about the presence of bodies, either human or alien. It wasn't until around 1978 when the first reports of dead aliens were made. The Air Force explains these were most likely from tests conducted in the early 1950s, and witnesses who came across the crash dummies may have confused the date with 1947 when they recalled events decades later. The report dismissed claims that spectators were told to forget what they saw. Logic dictates that if something was classified, screaming and hollering it was secret would compromise it and not protect its classification. In spite of these very plausible explanations, there are still some who reject this narrative and maintain that something strange happened in Roswell that the government is continuing to cover up. Once imagination took hold of the public, it is very unlikely any official report would stop it. Nearly 80 years later, Roswell remains one of the most famous UFO incidents in recent history, and the town itself capitalizes on its notoriety and is home to numerous alien-themed attractions, such as the International UFO Museum and Research Center, the Roswell UFO Spacewalk and Gallery, and even the town's McDonald's is made to look like a flying saucer. What was found on an isolated ranch in rural New Mexico that summer day in 1947 continues to capture the imaginations of thousands of UFO enthusiasts around the world, and the incident itself endures as an integral part of American folklore.